An entire civilization vanished without a single written word to explain why. We are going to investigate the sudden and complete collapse of the Indus Valley Civilization, one of history's most advanced and enigmatic societies. By the end of this, you will understand the full scope of this ancient mystery and the compelling evidence that points to its shocking end. What forced a thriving people to abandon their magnificent cities, and why do their silent ruins hold no signs of war or disaster? What does it truly take for a society to simply disappear from the earth? These were not simple villages huddled along a riverbank. At its peak, the Indus Valley Civilization was a marvel of the ancient world, a superpower whose achievements in urban planning remain almost incomprehensible even today. Its cities, like the great Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, were masterpieces of design, laid out with a precision that suggests a central, powerful authority. They were built on a strict grid system, with wide, straight main streets cutting across narrower lanes, all aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal directions. Walking through one of these cities would have felt strangely modern, a world away from the winding, chaotic alleys common in other ancient settlements. Beneath their feet, the inhabitants enjoyed a luxury many modern cities still struggle with, a sophisticated and universal water management system. Nearly every single house had its own private bathroom and a dedicated well. Wastewater was channeled through a network of clay pipes into covered drains that ran along the main streets, periodically accessed through manholes for cleaning. This was not a feature for the elite. It was a standard of living for a vast portion of the population, a testament to a society that valued public health and civic order on an unprecedented scale. This obsession with standardization extended to every facet of economic life. Archaeologists have found tiny, carefully shaped stone cubes, weights that are identical across the entire expanse of the civilization, from the shores of the Arabian Sea deep into the foothills of the Himalayas. A merchant in a distant outpost used the same system of measurement as a trader in the great capital cities. This points to a complex, integrated economy, one built on trust, and a shared set of rules that govern commerce across hundreds of thousands of square miles. Perhaps the most striking feature of this vast civilization is what it seems to be missing. There are no grand, fortified palaces looming over the cities. There are no colossal statues of warrior kings, no great victory monuments, and a shocking absence of the weapons of mass warfare that are so common in the archaeological records of Egypt and Mesopotamia. The art that survives depicts animals, plants, and ritual scenes, not conquests. The evidence paints a compelling portrait of a stable, prosperous, and seemingly peaceful society. A cohesive culture that thrived for centuries without the constant internal conflict or external threats that defined its contemporaries. This was a civilization that had seemingly mastered the art of urban living, a beacon of order and sophistication whose sudden silence is all the more deafening because of its profound success. But this golden age of order and prosperity could not last forever. The first cracks in the foundation began to appear, not with a bang, but with a slow, creeping decay. The meticulous urban planning that defined the civilization for centuries started to break down. In the later layers of cities like Mohenjo-daro, archaeologists see a troubling shift. New buildings were crammed into open spaces and even onto the wide main streets, disrupting the once perfect grid. It seems the strict civic rules were no longer being enforced, suggesting a weakening of the central authority that had held everything together for so long. This physical crowding was matched by a social and economic decline. The famous drainage systems, the very hallmark of their advanced society, began to fall into disrepair. Some drains were blocked and abandoned, while others were built over entirely. Imagine the consequence of this neglect, the slow creep of filth and wastewater into spaces that were once models of public health. At the same time, the quality of their distinctive crafts deteriorated. The beautiful, standardized pottery became rougher and less decorated. The intricate seals used for trade were carved with less skill and care. This points to a society losing its economic cohesion, where long-distance trade networks were fraying, and the artisans no longer had the same resources or patrons. What could have caused such a profound unraveling? The most compelling clues point not to invaders, but to the environment. The lifeblood of the Indus Valley Civilization was the river system, fed by predictable monsoon rains. Scientific evidence, extracted from ancient lake beds and ocean sediments, now tells a story of climatic catastrophe. It appears the region was struck by a prolonged and devastating drought, one that may have lasted for centuries. The monsoons, which they depended upon to fill their rivers and water their crops, simply began to fail. Think of the slow, grinding horror of that process. Year after year, the rains would be less reliable. The great Indus River and its tributaries would have shrunk, becoming unpredictable. Their agricultural base, which supported the dense urban populations, would have collapsed. Famine would have spread. Without enough food to sustain them, people would have begun to abandon the magnificent cities. They likely broke into smaller groups and migrated east and south in search of water, scattering their once unified culture to the winds. The civilization did not vanish in a single night, but faded away over generations, as its people were slowly starved out of their homes by a changing world. So we are left with these silent, sprawling cities, and their emptiness is the most profound clue of all. When archaeologists first began to carefully peel back the layers of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, they expected to find the usual signs of a civilization's violent end. They searched for the skeletons of defenders cut down in the streets, for the arrowheads embedded in crumbling walls, for the scorch marks of a great fire. Yet none of it was there. There are no mass graves, no heaps of bones telling a story of a final, desperate stand. The weapons they do find are simple, likely used for hunting, not the arsenals of a society consumed by war. This complete absence of violent conflict is perhaps the most baffling aspect of the entire mystery. It definitively rules out the dramatic theories of a sudden, overwhelming invasion that wiped the civilization from the map. The ruins do not tell a story of conquest, they tell a story of departure. The final layer of these cities is the most haunting of all. It is not a layer of ash and rubble, but one of slow decay. You find houses that were still occupied, their drains slowly clogging, their pottery becoming cruder. Then, at some point, the last inhabitants simply walked away. They took their most valuable possessions with them and left their homes to the dust. Walking through these final streets would have been an eerie experience. It was not a post-battle scene of carnage, but a place that felt like it was waiting for its people to return from a long journey. Tools might have been left in a corner, a broken pot set aside for repair. It was a life interrupted, not obliterated. This is what makes the Indus Valley collapse so uniquely unsettling. It presents us with a society that did not fall to a foreign enemy or a sudden cataclysm, but one that simply seemed to lose its reason for being, fading away until only the perfectly laid brickwork remained, a ghost of a golden age waiting silently for an explanation. With the ruins offering no clear answers, the investigation turns to the prime suspects. The oldest and most controversial theory points to outsiders. For decades, many historians believed the civilization was overrun by a wave of nomadic people from the northwest, the Aryans. Proponents of this idea pointed to ancient religious texts, composed later, that seemed to describe such an invasion. They argued these newcomers, with their horse-drawn chariots and different culture, swept through the region, conquering the cities and displacing the population. Yet, as we have seen, the archaeological record stubbornly refuses to cooperate. There is no layer of ash, no caches of new, foreign weapons, and no evidence of the mass violence such a conquest would entail. The theory has largely fallen out of favor, with most scholars now viewing it as a story told by later peoples, rather than a factual account of the Indus Valley's end. The mystery only deepens when the invaders fail to appear at the scene of the crime. This absence of an obvious villain forces us to look more closely at the environment itself. The most compelling suspects are not armies, but water and its devastating absence. One theory suggests the Indus River, the very heart of the civilization, dramatically changed its course. Rivers in flat, sandy plains are known to do this over time, sometimes shifting their channels by dozens of miles. If the Great Indus moved away from the cities, it would have been a death sentence. The sophisticated irrigation systems would have been left high and dry, turning fertile fields into dust, and severing the vital transportation routes that fueled their economy. Another equally catastrophic possibility is that the opposite occurred, a series of massive, unpredictable floods. The same monsoons that brought life could also bring destruction. If a period of intense rainfall caused the river to repeatedly breach its banks, it could have drowned the farmland with salt, ruined grain stores, and made urban life untenable. But the most powerful environmental theory of all is the mega-drought. Geological evidence from the region points to a monsoon system that collapsed for not just years, but for centuries. Imagine the slow, grinding horror of that process, a drought so profound it could drain an entire civilization of its will to survive. Perhaps the true culprit was not a single event, but a perfect storm of internal failures. What if this remarkably stable society contained the seeds of its own collapse? As the environmental stress mounted, the very things that made the civilization great may have become its undoing. The rigid standardization and powerful central authority that built the perfect cities could have made the society inflexible, unable to adapt when the rules no longer worked. When the trade with Mesopotamia, a key source of wealth and ideas, began to dry up, it would have shattered the economic foundation. The artisan class, who produced the beautiful seals and pottery, would have lost their livelihoods. This economic shock, combined with the environmental crisis, could have eroded public faith in the ruling class. Without a king or emperor to rally around, the social contract may have simply dissolved. People facing starvation and a breakdown of order would have had no reason to remain in the cities. They voted with their feet, dispersing into smaller, more mobile village communities, taking their culture with them, but leaving their civilization behind. This scattering was not an invasion, but a quiet migration, a retreat from complexity that left only enigmatic ruins in its wake. So the story of the Indus Valley Civilization is not one of a single, dramatic fall, but a quiet fading. It is a tale of a people who achieved a level of urban sophistication that would not be seen again for millennia, only to see their world slowly unravel. We are left with the ghostly perfection of their grid-patterned cities, their revolutionary water systems falling silent, and their unreadable script that holds the final secret. The evidence points not to a conquering army, but to a slow-moving catastrophe, a perfect storm of environmental shifts, economic collapse, and social fragmentation that drained the life from their society over generations. While we may never pinpoint the exact sequence of events with absolute certainty, the legacy of their disappearance is a powerful and haunting lesson. It reminds us that no civilization, no matter how advanced or seemingly stable, is immune to the forces of nature and the slow erosion of its own foundations. The silent ruins of Mohenjo-daro stand as a monument to this fragility. What do you think was the final straw that caused the last families to walk away from their homes for good? Was it the relentless drought, a river that abandoned its course, or simply the slow dissolution of a shared identity? We want to hear your theories. Share your thoughts in the comments below about what you believe happened to this vanished people, and subscribe for more journeys into the deepest mysteries of our past.